What if everything you believed about getting old was wrong? Maggie sat alone in her dimly lit kitchen, the ticking clock louder than the silence that surrounded her. At 67, she felt like a ghost in her own home, a woman slipping quietly into the background of life. The faded wallpaper, the chipped coffee mug in her hand, the unopened mail, each detail a reminder of days slowly drifting away. Her knees ached, her energy waned, and the ache of loneliness gnawed deeper than any physical pain. She used to be a teacher, a mother, a wife, now she was mostly invisible. Her daughter's sporadic texts felt like echoes from a distant world. The neighborhood buzzed with younger families, new technology, and fast-moving change. She felt forgotten, like a dusty book no one cared to read anymore. As she flipped through the TV channels looking for distraction, a headline stopped her: Elon Musk unveils humanoid robot now cheaper than a car. The word seemed surreal, almost impossible. Elon Musk, always the rebel, the visionary, was promising a future where robots could do the work humans once thought too complex or expensive. Maggie's heart stirred with a faint pulse of curiosity. Could this be a sign? Could it mean that even someone like her, long convinced that age was a cage, might still find a new way forward? She pressed the remote, replaying the clip. Elon's voice was calm yet electric. Age, limitations, failure, they are only barriers we create for ourselves. The future is open to those who dare to reinvent. The words echoed through Maggie's mind like a challenge. Was she ready to dare? Her hands trembled as she reached for her phone. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The screen flashed this invitation, and Maggie felt something unfamiliar, a flicker of hope, a call to action she hadn't felt in years. She wanted to answer, to connect, to be part of something bigger than her shrinking world. But fear held her back. What if she tried and failed? What if she was simply too old? The kitchen grew colder, the shadows deeper, but that spark, the spark Elon Musk had ignited, refused to fade. Tonight, something inside Maggie shifted. The quiet ache of her loneliness was joined by the loud beat of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment it all changed. Before that night when Elon Musk's announcement broke through the fog of Maggie's life, she had lived years quietly folding into the background of her own story. Maggie Johnston had once been a woman full of dreams, a teacher who loved her classroom and the challenge of guiding young minds. She remembered vividly the smell of chalk dust, the chatter of students in the hallway, the pride that swelled when a shy child finally understood a hard lesson. Those years had been her identity, her purpose. But retirement brought silence. The school halls were empty to her now, and so was her house. Her husband, Tom, had passed away 5 years earlier, leaving behind an emptiness too large to fill. Their marriage had been a partnership of shared dreams and quiet understanding. She often thought back to the evenings they spent tinkering in the garage, building simple robots from kits Tom had collected as a hobby. Those robots had never been anything fancy, but they were their little project, their bond. That memory, the smell of sawdust, the soft clinking of tools, the warm glow of the workbench lamp, was like a lighthouse in the storm of her fading days. Her daughter, Sarah, was now a busy woman living across the country. Their relationship was strained, fractured by years of misunderstandings and unspoken words. Maggie regretted missed opportunities to bridge that gap, felt the sting of silence between them like a constant ache. She had wanted to be a grandmother, a mentor, a presence in Sarah's life, but distance and time had built walls too high. Maggie often sat in the living room, the house around her cluttered with reminders of the past. Old photo albums, faded letters, and the robot kits boxed away in the attic like relics from another lifetime. She struggled with aches and fatigue, the daily tasks becoming heavier, the world moving faster than her pace. The mornings were the hardest, waking up to an empty bed, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the stillness. Her neighbors greeted her politely but kept their distance, wrapped up in their own busy lives. Technology baffled her now. Her smartphone was mostly a source of frustration rather than connection. The loneliness felt like an invisible weight, pressing down until it was hard to breathe. She longed for meaning, for something to ignite a spark in her days. Yet the voice inside her often whispered, "You're too old for this. It's too late." But the memory of that garage, the joy of creating with Tom, refused to be completely buried. She remembered the pride in his eyes when their first small robot moved under its own power, clunky and imperfect but alive. That robot symbolized everything she had lost: youth, creativity, connection, hope. She kept that memory tucked close, like a secret treasure. Then came that evening, sitting in her kitchen with the TV flickering, when Elon Musk's words shattered the silence. His declaration that humanoid robots were now cheaper than a car wasn't just news, it was a jolt, a beacon. Maggie realized that innovation was not just for the young or the tech-savvy, it was a call to everyone willing to reimagine what was possible. She thought about Tom, about how he had always believed in pushing boundaries, in never settling. Maybe, she told herself, it wasn't too late to find a new purpose, to reclaim that lost part of herself. The days that followed were filled with quiet reflection and restless thoughts. Maggie found herself revisiting the boxes in the attic, pulling out the old robot kits, feeling the familiar weight of the tools in her hands. The parts were outdated, some rusty, but her fingers remembered the movements, the assembly, the joy of making something work. She started small. Cleaning, tinkering, experimenting. Her muscles ached, her mind wrestled with frustration, but with each small success, the fog began to lift. She was no longer just a woman fading away, she was becoming a creator again. And then there was the ache, the inner war between hope and doubt. Maggie wondered if her daughter would understand, if anyone would care. She feared failure, feared ridicule. The doctor's advice echoed in her mind, "Slow down, Maggie. Take it easy." But she felt a new fire inside that wouldn't let her stop. The past seemed less like a prison and more like a foundation to build upon. Maggie was standing at the edge of a new chapter, with Elon Musk's vision lighting the way. The promise of technology, of radical reinvention, became her silent partner. She was ready to fight the invisibility that came with age, ready to reclaim her place in the world, not despite her years but because of them. What if the lost years were simply a pause? What if the future held more than she dared to dream? Those questions lingered in her heart, growing louder, urging her forward. This was her life before the shift, the calm before the storm, the quiet before the breakthrough. But Maggie was ready. The journey was about to begin. The morning started earlier now. Not because Maggie slept less, though that was true too, but because her mind refused to let her rest in the same quiet, empty way. Since that night, Elon's voice crackling through her TV, the phrase, "reinvent yourself," etched into her bones, something in her had shifted. But with change came resistance. The body remembers comfort, and the soul remembers fear. Her knees still hurt when she bent over the old workbench in the garage. Her hands, once confident and nimble, now fumbled more than they followed direction. And the little voice inside her head, so familiar, so subtle, kept whispering, "Who are you kidding? You're not Elon Musk. You're not anyone listens to anymore." She tried to push it back as she laid out the old circuit board from the dusty kit she and Tom never finished. The instructions were still legible, faded at the edges. She could hear Tom's voice, patient, teasing, excited, guiding her hand, though he'd been gone half a decade. His absence sat beside her like a second shadow. She adjusted her glasses, adjusted her expectations, and kept going. That first morning, she got the legs assembled. They didn't move yet, but they stood. Somehow, that felt like a win. The second morning, she spilled a jar of screws and spent 20 minutes on her hands and knees collecting them. Her body protested, her patience frayed, and that voice returned. "Why are you doing this? No one's watching. No one cares." But she was watching. She cared. Or at least she was trying to. That was more than she could say about last year. Or the year before. The next week was harder. Her daughter Sarah called, out of obligation more than interest, and when Maggie mentioned she was rebuilding one of Tom's old robot kits, Sarah sighed. "Mom, don't push yourself. Just, maybe do a puzzle or something. You're not 20 anymore." Maggie nodded politely, biting back the hurt. The distance between them was more than miles. It was a wall built from years of misunderstandings, unmet expectations, and the slow erosion of closeness. She hadn't told Sarah about the Elon clip. Or the journal she'd started keeping every morning before sunrise, filled with ideas, questions, sketches. Or the hours she spent watching tutorials online, straining to learn things she'd never dared attempt before. Because what would be the point? To prove something? To defend a dream already slipping through her fingers? But deep down, Maggie didn't want to prove anything. She wanted to remember what it felt like to be alive. Not just existing from day to day, from doctor's appointment to rerun to lukewarm meal. She wanted to build again. To create. To matter. And Elon's voice kept ringing in her head, "The future belongs to those willing to reinvent themselves." She watched old clips of him speaking, not for fandom but for fuel. There was something unapologetic about the way he embraced the impossible. His confidence wasn't arrogance, it was defiance against the rules the world tried to write for people like him, and now, for people like her. Maggie sat on her porch one evening, the summer air heavy with humidity and the faint scent of lilacs from the neighbor's yard. She stared at the stars. Somewhere up there were rockets he'd launched. And down here, on this quiet street where mail still came by hand and screen doors still slammed, she was trying to build a robot. It made her laugh, a little. Then cry, a little more. She missed Tom most in these quiet victories, the ones no one else would see. That night, she dreamed about a classroom again. Not the school she used to teach in, but one filled with adults her age. All of them hunched over desks, trying to remember how to solder wires or read blueprints. Elon stood at the chalkboard, drawing equations none of them understood, but instead of fear or confusion, there was excitement in the room. She woke up before the bell rang. The next morning, she bought a new toolkit online. It took her 20 minutes to find the right one, another 10 to figure out her password, and nearly an hour to type in her payment information correctly. But she did it. And she marked it down in her notebook, day 11. Ordered new tools. Felt like a tech god. The garage started to feel like a place of purpose again. Dust gave way to motion. The old parts began to take shape. Her robot, still nameless, had a torso now, a patchwork of salvaged plastic and metal, but standing upright. Maggie gave it eyes, makeshift lenses from a broken flashlight. When she turned on the light and they blinked to life, even if it was just a flicker, she gasped. "Hello, world," she whispered, laughing at the old programmer phrase. But then came another blow. Her doctor called with test results. Her cholesterol was up. Her blood pressure borderline. He asked, gently, if she'd been overexerting herself. "I've been, moving more," she admitted. "Staying active. I've started a project." He reminded her she wasn't a young woman. "You don't need to push yourself," he said kindly. "It's okay to take it easy." But the words sat like stones in her stomach. Take it easy. That was what everyone wanted her to do. Sit down. Quiet down. Fade out. Like her season had passed, and now all that was left was maintenance until the final breath. Maggie stared at the robot in the garage that night and whispered, "Am I crazy for thinking I still have something left to build?" The robot, of course, said nothing. But its blinking flashlight eyes seemed to reflect something back at her, a tiny rebellion. She sat beside it, notebook in her lap, hands still stained with oil. She wrote, slowly, deliberately, "I am not done yet." That night she posted her first comment on a robotics forum. Just a short note, older woman, former teacher, getting back into robotics with old kits. Looking for beginner advice. But it was like tossing a stone into a pond. The next morning, someone replied. Then 2 more. Encouragement. Tips. One man, a retired engineer in Idaho, offered to send her some extra parts he didn't need. "We're never too old to tinker," he wrote. Maggie stared at the message for a long time. Her hands trembled as she typed "thank you." The next day, she woke up with a sense of urgency. She added fingers to the robot's hands, clumsy but jointed. It was starting to look human. Not sleek like the ones Elon had shown, but full of personality. The thought made her smile. In the mirror, she studied her reflection. Same wrinkles. Same gray hair. But something behind the eyes had changed. Determination. Defiance. The inner war hadn't ended. Doubts still came, especially when the parts didn't fit, when her back hurt, when Sarah didn't respond to her texts. But now there was something fighting back against the doubts, something stubborn and beautiful. A will to create. A refusal to fade. And every time the voice in her head whispered, "You're too old," she whispered back, "Watch me." Elon Musk didn't know her name. But somehow, he had thrown her a lifeline, a challenge disguised as an announcement. A robot cheaper than a car. A future that still had room for late bloomers. Maggie wasn't trying to change the world. She was just trying to change her own. And for the first time in years, it felt like that was enough. The change wasn't loud. It didn't come with fireworks or applause. It didn't even come with certainty. It came quietly, the way most real change does, through one small choice, one moment when doing something felt better than doing nothing. For Maggie, that moment arrived on a Tuesday morning. She was sipping instant coffee, the kind she used to make for Tom when they were rushing out the door to work. The garage called to her now, not with urgency, but with promise. Her knees still ached when she bent, her fingers still fumbled, but her heart beat differently now. It had rhythm, anticipation, something to look forward to. The robot on her bench, nicknamed Blue, because of the navy spray paint she'd used on its shell, was beginning to resemble something more than a jumble of parts. Its arms moved now. Not gracefully, but enough to signal life. Its eyes lit up in response to a basic voice command, thanks to a speech module someone from the forum had helped her code. "Hello, Blue," she would say, and the flashlight eyes blinked once. It wasn't much, but it was everything. That morning, with sunlight pouring in through the garage window and her notebook open beside her, she made a decision. She would film it. Not for fame, not even for recognition, but because she needed to see herself doing something brave. She set up her phone with a stack of cookbooks, hit record, and stepped in front of Blue. "Day 24, she said into the camera, voice shaking a little. "It's not perfect, but this is the first robot I've built since my husband passed away. I'm 67. I used to teach science. I thought I was done learning. Turns out, I was just scared." She stepped back. "Blue, wave hello." The robot's right arm lifted with a jerky, clunky motion, more like a spasm than a wave, but Maggie laughed anyway, genuinely and fully. "Close enough," she said. She stopped recording and sat down, trembling a little, not from exhaustion, but from adrenaline. She'd done it. She wasn't just building the robot anymore. She was becoming part of the story. For a few hours, she debated what to do with the video. She could keep it. Share it with the forum. Or, her finger hovered over the upload button, post it publicly. She hadn't touched her old YouTube account in years. It still had the profile photo of her and Tom from a vacation to Lake Tahoe. She remembered that trip vividly. How they'd danced to a live band by the lake and stayed up late talking about building something together one day. A little company maybe. A tutoring center. A robotics club for kids. They never followed through. Life had happened instead. Jobs. Bills. Then cancer. That dream had died quietly, like so many others. Until now. Her thumb pressed down, and the video went live. Just building something for fun again, she typed in the description. Trying to see if I still can. She shut her laptop and went for a walk. It was something she'd started doing more of lately. Just down the block and back, sometimes twice if the weather was kind. She passed the neighbor kids playing basketball in the driveway. She waved. They waved back. That didn't used to happen. Maybe they'd always waved and she hadn't seen it before. Or maybe they were starting to see her. When she returned, the video had 27 views. 2 comments. One said, "This is awesome. My grandma just started learning 3D printing. Keep going." The other said, "You're an inspiration. More of this, please." Maggie blinked at the screen, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Someone, 2 someones, out there in the wide world had seen her. Not just seen, but heard. She refreshed. 39 views now. 3 more comments. Her heart raced. She posted a follow-up comment thanking everyone, then sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. Something had shifted. Not just in the robot, but in her. That night she had a dream. In it, Blue was walking, not well, more like wobbling, and she and Tom stood together, arms around each other, laughing as it tried to carry a potted plant across the room. In the dream, Tom turned to her and said, "I always knew you'd finish it." She woke with tears on her cheeks. The next day, she opened a new journal. This one wasn't for sketches or wiring notes. It was for ideas. Big ones. What if she could get other seniors involved? What if Blue could help people, carry groceries, remind someone to take medication, even just keep them company? Elon Musk said robots could change the world. Maggie believed they could change a single life, too. She had a coffee date that day with her neighbor Sharon, who was in her 70s and mostly kept to herself. Maggie brought her tablet and showed her the video. Sharon watched in silence, then smiled. "You built that?" "Piece by piece," Maggie said. "With help from strangers online and a very stubborn streak." Sharon nodded. "I was an engineer's assistant back in the day," she said. "Used to love wiring circuits. Haven't touched a soldering iron in years." Maggie leaned forward. "Want to help with the next one?" Sharon stared at her, surprised. "Then, maybe I do." By the end of the week, they were working together in the garage. Sharon brought her old tool kit, and they laughed about how the soldering gun still smelled the same, metallic and slightly burnt. Blue watched silently from the workbench as 2 older women created sparks, both literally and figuratively. They called it, the club. No formal rules. No dues. Just people with gray hair and big dreams. Sharon invited another neighbor. Maggie emailed a librarian she knew from town. Before long, the garage had folding chairs and a calendar pinned to the wall. Tuesday builds, it read. Coffee and circuits. Maggie still wasn't sure what she was building, exactly. A community? A movement? Maybe just a reason to wake up excited. She was eating better now. Sleeping deeper. Smiling more. Sarah hadn't responded to her texts, but Maggie didn't feel crushed by the silence anymore. She had rediscovered a voice that wasn't defined by anyone else's approval. One morning, Maggie opened her YouTube inbox and found a message. "Hi. I work with a nonprofit that supports STEM learning for seniors. Would you be willing to share your story on our podcast?" Her breath caught. She read it again. And again. "Me?" She typed back, "I'm not an expert, but I'm building something. And I'm learning a lot. Happy to share." It was just one interview. But it led to more. People started emailing, commenting. One woman in Florida said she had started teaching herself how to code at 72 because of Maggie's video. Another man said he had pulled his old toolbox out of the attic and started fixing up a broken drone. Maggie printed their messages and taped them to the garage wall. A reminder that one small choice, posting a video, had become something larger than fear, larger than doubt. Blue's arm movement had improved by then. With a little help from Sharon and a few tutorials, they had added better servos. Now, when Maggie said, "Hello, Blue," the robot blinked and gave a proper wave. She filmed it again. Uploaded it again. This time, the video passed 1,000 views in a day. Maggie didn't need the numbers. But they told her something she hadn't heard clearly in a long time: you matter. One thing had changed. One choice had been made. That was all it took to set the rest in motion. Not overnight. Not perfectly. But undeniably. She didn't feel old in the same way anymore. She felt seasoned. Like a tree with deep roots and fresh buds, reaching again for the sun. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Maggie was hunched over the workbench, tuning the fingers on Blue's left hand, when her phone buzzed once, then again, and then continuously. At first, she thought maybe the group chat with Sharon and the others had come alive, maybe someone had found a new discount parts supplier or figured out how to connect the battery pack more efficiently. But when she finally wiped the grease from her hands and picked up the phone, she froze. Her latest video, Blue's first high five, had passed 10,000 views. Then 20,000. The comments were pouring in, and the little red notification dot wouldn't stop glowing. One of the comments said, "I just showed this to my mom," she cried. "You're showing the world what retirement can really mean." Another said, "This is the most inspiring thing I've seen all week. Please don't stop." But it was the email that broke her. Not broke in a bad way, broke open. It was from a man named Dave, who introduced himself as the director of a technology newsletter focused on the human side of innovation. He'd seen her video and wanted to feature her in their next edition. "It's rare," he wrote, "to see someone reinventing themselves not just with technology, but with so much heart. You're showing us what it means to age boldly." Maggie put the phone down, walked to the sink, and ran cold water over her hands. Her reflection in the kitchen window caught her off guard. She looked like herself. Not the tired, invisible woman who stared blankly at the walls a month ago, but someone else entirely. Someone awake. And then she cried. Not the quiet, lonely tears she'd grown used to. These were hot and full and cracking something deep inside her open. It wasn't about going viral or being featured. It was about what it meant. Someone had seen her. Not as a woman past her prime. Not as someone who needed help. But as a builder. A creator. A risk-taker. She grabbed a pen, flipped to the next blank page in her notebook, and wrote one word in all caps: enough. Enough waiting. Enough apologizing for wanting more. Enough tiptoeing through her own life like she was just lucky to still be here. That afternoon, she pushed Blue into the center of the garage floor. "Let's show them," she whispered. She hooked up the new voice chip Sharon had scavenged from a warehouse sale 2 towns over. They'd spent the last 2 meetings figuring out how to program it to respond to more than one phrase. Maggie leaned in and said, "Blue, what's your name?" Blue paused, just a beat, and responded, "My name is Blue." Built by Maggie. It was a robotic voice, sure, and a little garbled at the end, but Maggie gasped like it had just sung an aria. She clapped. Blue clapped back. Well, its palms came together once, loudly, like a slow-motion cheer. She grabbed her camera. This moment had to be shared. She didn't care if no one watched. But of course, they did. She uploaded the new clip that evening. She didn't try to dress it up with music or effects. It was raw. Honest. Her face flushed with pride, her hands still stained with work, her eyes bright and full of something she hadn't let herself feel in years, joy. The comments hit harder this time. People weren't just applauding the robot. They were sharing their stories. One woman from Arizona said she had started sketching again after decades of thinking she wasn't good enough. A retired mechanic from Michigan sent a photo of a bicycle he'd refurbished for his grandson. A former nurse from Maine wrote, "I didn't realize how much I missed solving problems. You reminded me I still can." Maggie printed their comments and taped them to her kitchen wall. By Saturday, there were so many that the wallpaper barely showed behind them. She called it her wall of proof, proof that late beginnings weren't lesser beginnings. That same week, Sarah texted her out of the blue. No greeting. Just a link. Maggie clicked on it. It was a news article titled, "Grandmother Builds Robot from Scratch, Inspires Thousands." Her video had made local news. Then national. At the bottom of the article was a short paragraph. Maggie Johnston, 67, of Illinois, says she's just getting started. She credits the work of Elon Musk as a spark that reminded her anything is possible, at any age. Maggie stared at the screen. She hadn't even realized the writer was quoting her. She must have said it during the phone interview she gave earlier in the week. A follow-up text came from Sarah. "Mom. I didn't know you were doing all this. Why didn't you say something?" Maggie stared at the blinking cursor, then replied, "I didn't think you'd believe it." It took 10 minutes, but Sarah responded, "I'm proud of you. Truly." That message hit harder than any comment, any like, any view count. It came from the one person she had given up hoping would understand. Maggie didn't respond right away. She read it again. Then a third time. The next morning, she sent a selfie of her in blue, robot arm raised in a fist of victory, her smile wide and a little silly. Sarah texted back a row of laughing emojis, then, "When can I come see it in person?" Maggie replied, "Whenever you're ready." That Sunday, the garage was packed. Sharon brought her niece. Maggie's neighbor Ted stopped by to show off the drone he'd been fixing up. 2 kids from down the street asked if they could watch. Maggie handed them safety goggles and said, "Only if you promise to teach me something back." The laughter was loud. The tinkering even louder. And through it all, Blue sat quietly in the corner, blinking, waiting, ready. Later that night, when everyone had gone home, Maggie sat at the bench alone again. But it didn't feel like the old kind of alone. It felt full. Like the kind of quiet that comes after a song ends, when the echo still hums through your bones. She looked around the garage. Tools out of place. Chairs stacked in the corner. Wires snaking along the wall. It looked alive. She pressed the record button on her phone one last time for the day. "Hi," she said softly. "To anyone out there watching who thinks they've run out of time or chances, please hear me. I thought the same. I thought I was too old, too tired, too late. But I was wrong. What I needed wasn't youth or genius. I just needed a spark. Something, or someone, to remind me I still had a fire in me." She reached over and tapped Blue's shoulder. "This isn't just a robot. It's a promise. That I'm not done yet. And neither are you." She ended the video, exhaled slowly, and stepped outside. The stars were out again. She tilted her head back, letting the quiet settle. Somewhere up there, rockets were orbiting. Elon Musk was probably in another meeting, chasing Mars or building tunnels under cities. But here on Earth, in a modest garage in Illinois, one woman had broken through the noise of her doubts, the grip of her fear, and the illusion of being forgotten. Not because she waited for permission. But because she acted on one small thing. Because she said yes to trying. And that was all it took to begin. The morning sun spilled through the kitchen window, casting a golden glow over the cluttered table where Maggie sat, notebook open, pen in hand, coffee cooling beside her. The notebook had nearly filled up now, not just with sketches or schematics, but with memories in the making. Notes about motor speeds and wiring were scribbled right next to grocery lists and ideas for future videos. It was no longer just a log of progress. It had become a diary of purpose. Something had changed in her, yes, but something even more profound had changed around her. The silence that once filled the house had given way to the subtle hum of messages pinging her inbox, the sound of Blue's gears whirring softly in the garage, and occasionally, laughter echoing from Sharon's now regular visits. Maggie looked out the window. Fall had begun to flirt with the town. The leaves on the maple tree in her front yard were just beginning to turn. Time, once a burden she feared, had become something else. A current she was finally swimming with, not against. She thought about legacy, something she hadn't dared dwell on since Tom's funeral. For years, the idea of what she would leave behind had haunted her. She wasn't rich. She hadn't written books or founded companies. Her daughter had grown distant. Her name wasn't printed in any halls of fame. But now she was starting to see it differently. Legacy wasn't something big and polished. It wasn't marble plaques or obituaries or even recognition. Legacy was motion. It was energy passed forward. It was a spark. Like the one Elon had given her with just a few words and a flash of vision. A reminder that it was okay to question the rules of aging. That maybe, just maybe, you were allowed to keep evolving. Even at 67. Maybe especially at 67. She turned to a new page in the notebook and wrote, "A legacy isn't what you leave behind. It's what you set in motion before you go." That week, she taught Sharon how to code a basic voice command module. Sharon, to Maggie's delight, took to it with the kind of joy only rediscovery can bring. They laughed like kids when they got the syntax right and Blue responded with a crisp, "Good afternoon, Sharon." Maggie had even invited 2 teenagers from down the block to join one of their garage sessions. Their wide-eyed curiosity reminded her of the students she used to teach decades ago. But this time, it wasn't a classroom. It was a workshop, informal and full of life. One of the kids asked her, "Did you go to MIT or something?" She laughed, heartily. "Nope. Just married a guy who liked building robots in his spare time and spent a lifetime learning one little thing at a time." That moment stuck with her. The look on the boy's face, not disappointment, but awe. He didn't need her to be a genius. He just needed to see someone trying. That was the kind of teacher she had always wanted to be. One who reminded people they already had what they needed to begin. The garage now had a name, the Tinker Room. Maggie painted a little wooden sign and hung it over the door. Not because she needed a label, but because she wanted to make it official, not just for herself, but for everyone who stepped inside. It was a space where age wasn't a limitation. Where ideas mattered more than wrinkles. Where mistakes were part of the joy, not something to be ashamed of. Sarah visited 2 weekends later. Maggie had tidied the house but didn't go overboard. She wanted her daughter to see her real life now, not something staged. Sarah pulled into the driveway with 2 coffees and a hesitant smile. Maggie met her outside with a hug. It was awkward, then warm. They hadn't hugged like that in years. "So," Sarah said, glancing at the garage. "Is this where the magic happens?" Maggie nodded. "Want to meet him?" She led Sarah inside, proud and a little nervous. Blue sat on the workbench, looking just as alive as ever. Maggie tapped the power switch. Blue blinked, then raised its arm. "Hello, Sarah." Sarah's mouth fell open. You programmed it to say my name?" "Of course," Maggie said softly. "I talk about you a lot." There was a long pause. Sarah stepped closer, touched Blue's arm like she might wake it. "This is amazing, Mom. I had no idea you were doing all this." I thought you'd just. I don't know, slowed down. Maggie smiled. So did I. But slowing down isn't the same as stopping. I just forgot that for a while. They spent the afternoon together, sipping coffee, soldering a few wires, and watching old videos Maggie had filmed for her small but loyal audience. Sarah asked questions. Real questions. About circuits. About vision. About life. It wasn't a miracle reunion. There were still scars, but it was a beginning. The next day, Maggie recorded a video she'd been too scared to make before. No robot tricks. No tools in hand. Just her, sitting on the back steps, a fall breeze tugging at her sweater. I used to think life had seasons, she said into the camera. Childhood, adulthood, retirement. Each with a fixed role. But now I think maybe life is more like orbit. You keep circling the same truths until something pulls you in. And maybe aging isn't about fading out. Maybe it's about pulling closer to the thing that matters. You don't need to be young to start. You just need to start. She paused, her voice breaking a little. I thought my legacy would be the things I didn't do. The goodbyes. The regrets. The missed chances. But now I think maybe my legacy is this moment. And if you're watching this, maybe it can be part of yours too. She ended the video and set the phone down. Not for views. Not for praise. But because she needed to say it. Needed to live it. That week, she was invited to speak, virtually, at a local community college. The topic, reimagining possibility after 60. Maggie had never spoken on camera to a crowd before. She wasn't polished. She stammered a bit. Lost her place once. But when she looked into the camera and said, "The world didn't give me permission to begin again, I gave that to myself," the chat filled with emojis, hearts, and clapping hands. A professor emailed her afterward. "We'd love to build a partnership. Seniors teaching alongside students. Would you be open to mentoring?" Maggie cried again, alone this time, and nodded to no one in particular. Tom would have loved this. Would have danced around the kitchen with her. She imagined him holding her hand and saying, "Told you that spark was still in there." That evening, she stood in the garage, hands on her hips, looking around at everything they'd built, not just Blue, but the benches, the chairs, the sign, the energy. Sharon waved from her porch. The boys across the street were skateboarding. Somewhere, in 1,000 different homes, people were building things again because of her videos, her spark. She had feared becoming irrelevant. Forgotten. But she had done the opposite. She had become a beginning. Maggie stepped forward, placed her hand on Blue's head, and whispered, "We did good, didn't we?" The robot blinked. She smiled. A legacy wasn't a statue. It wasn't a perfect goodbye. It was a living, breathing thread that wove through every person you touched, every risk you took, every fear you pushed through to remind someone else they could too. Maggie was still here. Still building. Still mattering. And this was only the beginning. Maggie stood in the garage one morning, the autumn light filtering through the dusty window panes, illuminating the gentle hum of Blue and the scattered tools on the workbench. Everything seemed charged with possibility, every gear, every circuit board, every scribbled note a testament to how far she traveled. She held her phone, remembering the countless clips of Elon Musk unveiling Optimus, his voice echoing, "Should cost less than half of a car, will eventually cost less than $20,000, or the estimation that production-priced robots were already breaking below $50,000 and headed for the single-digit thousands someday." These weren't just statistics. They were fuel, proof that what she was doing, messy and small, tied into something much larger. Her neighbor Sharon shuffled in through the open garage door, her steps sure and steady. "Morning," Sharon said quietly. She watched Maggie flip through Elon's latest video on her phone, this time Optimus performing factory tasks, moving with fluidity, precision, intelligence. They make it look so effortless, Maggie whispered. And yet. Sharon peered over her shoulder. But so do we, she said gently. Every movement Blue makes, every time someone shows up here, you're a part of something real. You're building more than a robot. Maggie closed her eyes. Her vision and Elon's grand vision, robots democratized, affordable, ubiquitous, both felt real and distant at the same time. She whispered, Elon sees a $20,000 robot as a gateway to a future with abundance. Sharon nodded, understanding. Even if the numbers felt abstract, the meaning behind them was powerful. Tuesday arrived. The Tinker Room was alive again, chairs, soldering irons, laughter. Maggie held court at the center, helping Deborah, a retired librarian, wire a light sensor onto Blue's shoulder. The kids from down the block skated in the driveway, their energy an electric counterpoint to Maggie's low hum. Her phone buzzed. It was another message from a robotics club in California. They'd seen her video and wanted her to host a virtual keynote, growing tech confidence after retirement. Maggie's heart raced. Later, when silence returned, she watched a clip of Elon explaining how mass production and the shared supply chain expertise in electric vehicles would drive down the cost of humanoids, and how, in time, luxury would yield to affordability. The math was staggering. Comparing material cost, CPUs, batteries, yes, robots should become cheaper. And yet, Maggie wasn't building for mass markets. She was building for her life, and for the lives of people like her. That duet, the global and the deeply personal, stirred something fierce inside her. At dinner, she pulled up a chair next to Sarah's bedroom door and knocked softly. "Can we talk for a bit?" she asked. When Sarah nodded, Maggie guided her into the garage, now dusted clean. Blue stood under a makeshift spotlight, its eyes blinking steadily. Maggie tapped the speech module. "Maggie's reality," it said in its gentle mechanical tone. Sarah's eyes glistened. "You've built more than a robot," she said. "You've built a community." They talked. Not about tech specs or Elon's price targets or mass production dreams. They talked about Maggie's dreams, the ones that paused with Tom's illness, the ones buried under years of shoulds and time's up. Maggie realized then that Elon's vision had given her permission to reignite her own. The robot half-built in the garage was just the beginning. A few days later, Maggie prepped for her keynote. She set up the camera against the backdrop of the Tinker Room, Blue standing sentinel nearby. Her first sentence, "I was 67, convinced aging meant fading out." Then Elon Musk talked about robots costing less than half of a car, and suddenly, I dared to believe I could begin again. She spoke of fear and hope, of generational gaps bridged by curiosity, of legacy built not by inheritance but by ignition. When she posted the talk, she didn't expect much. A few hundred views, she thought. But within hours, responses flooded in. One attendee, a retired machinist in Oregon, wrote, "Your story made me turn my shop lights back on." Another from Georgia, "My mother is 70 and afraid she's irrelevant, she might watch this together." Maggie stared at the screen in quiet awe. Elon's talk had brought global attention, her words brought personal resonance. That evening, she watched news coverage of China's humanoid robot games, machines performing dances, athletic moves, even roundhouse kicks. The coverage praised the ambitions, but experts cautioned. Balance, dexterity, safety were still major hurdles. She thought of Blue, unsteady, wobbly, imperfect, but beloved. Technology might be chasing commercialization, but warmth, connection, and purpose, they belonged to Maggie's world as much as theirs. She closed her eyes. Elon's vision stretched like a roadmap, but her own journey was the one she walked, step by step. And in doing so, she could light the road for others, proof that reinvention isn't just for dreamers but doers, no matter the year on their birth certificate. The leaves had fully turned by the time Maggie found herself walking the cracked sidewalk of her childhood neighborhood. It had been years since she'd returned. The houses looked smaller now, the trees taller, but the memories rushed in like water through a broken dam. She stood in front of the old White House on Garland Street, staring at the porch where her father used to sit on Saturday mornings, polishing tools with the same focus she now brought to blues wiring. That house had once held her whole world, before Tom, before Sarah, before time stretched and bent her life into something she hardly recognized. She didn't come here to reminisce. She came with a purpose. The local senior center was hosting a community event, New Chapters, Reinventing After 60. The coordinator, Maria, had found Maggie online and invited her to speak. "You'll be surrounded by your peers," Maria had said. "People who need what you're offering, not tech, necessarily, but possibility." Maggie had almost said no. What could she possibly say that hadn't been said 100 times before? But then she thought about Elon's early interviews, the awkward ones, where he was all stammer and spark, explaining colonization plans and electric dreams like they were as common as toast. He hadn't waited for perfection. He'd spoken while building. So would she. The event was held in the old church gymnasium. Fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, and folding chairs formed uneven rows. A table in the corner offered cookies and decaf coffee. Maggie stood at the front, a makeshift podium in front of her, Blue standing quietly beside her on a rolling cart. At first, the audience just stared. There were skeptical faces, a few raised eyebrows. She recognized that look. It was the one she'd worn when she first saw Elon announce a humanoid robot on stage and thought, well, that's ridiculous. Maggie adjusted her microphone and took a breath. "Hi," she said. "My name is Maggie Johnston. I'm 67 years old, and 2 months ago, I was afraid my best years were already behind me. Then I heard a billionaire say something that changed everything." She paused. The room was quiet. Curious. Elon Musk said his company would soon build a humanoid robot that cost less than a car. And I thought, if that's possible, what else is? She gestured toward Blue. So I built one. The gasp came softly, then more audibly as Blue waved. Maggie smiled. I didn't go to MIT. I didn't have a team of engineers. I had time, curiosity, and a bit of nerve. A woman in the second row raised her hand, hesitant. But why? What's it for? Maggie tilted her head. It's for me. For my soul. For proving to myself that I'm not done. That I still have something to give and something to learn. That cracked the room open. Stories started pouring out. One man shared how he used to play guitar but stopped after arthritis made it painful. A woman had been an artist once, before her husband's illness took all her time. Another had been a welder, proud of her strength, until someone told her she was too old to be on a job site. Maggie listened, nodded, and said quietly, maybe it's time we stop letting the world tell us when we're done. After the event, people crowded around Blue. Not because of the tech, but because it symbolized something bigger. That robot, clunky and endearing, was proof that reinvention didn't belong only to Silicon Valley. It belonged on Garland Street, in church gyms, and kitchen tables too. Maria handed Maggie a manila folder before she left. Just a few letters from attendees, she said. You really made an impact. Maggie waited until she was home to read them. One note, written in shaky cursive, simply read, I'm going to dig out my old poetry. You made me believe I still have something worth saying. Another said, you reminded me of my dad, he used to tinker in the garage. I miss that sound. Maggie placed the letters in her notebook, between her wiring diagrams and blog drafts. She labeled the page, Proof of Purpose. A few days later, she returned to her old neighborhood again. This time, she knocked on the door of a familiar house. It took a while, but eventually the door creaked open. Mrs. Evelyn Clark, now in her 80s, wrapped in a shawl, peered out. "Maggie," she said, surprised. "Little Maggie from next door?" "Not so little anymore," Maggie smiled. "I was just passing by and thought I'd say hello." They sat on the porch for over an hour, talking about everything and nothing. Evelyn had always been sharp, opinionated, and funny. She hadn't changed. "I saw your robot on the news," she said suddenly. "That was you?" Maggie nodded. Evelyn leaned in. "Can I tell you something? I spent the last decade crocheting and watching game shows. Nothing wrong with that, but I used to teach physics, if you can believe it. Then I just stopped." Her voice trembled. "You made me remember who I was." Maggie's throat tightened. They talked long after the sun dipped. And when she left, Evelyn said, "Come back soon. Maybe we can tinker together." Maggie laughed. "I'd like that." The following week, Maggie posted a new video, Rebuilding Your Future on Familiar Streets. She filmed from Garland Street, standing in front of her old home, Blue parked beside her. "Sometimes," she said into the camera, "our future is buried right where we started. In the houses we grew up in. The neighbors who still remember our names. The hobbies we gave up because we thought we had to." She paused. "This isn't about robots. It's about reminding ourselves that the stories aren't over. You're not a has-been. You're a becoming." The video exploded again. Not with millions of views, but with meaningful ones. People from small towns, forgotten neighborhoods, lonely corners of the country wrote in, "I walked my old street today. I called my childhood best friend. I sat on my porch and felt young again." Maggie cried, quietly, at the foot of her stairs as she read them. Blue stood silently nearby, its sensors dim but alert, like a companion more than a machine. One evening, Sarah called. Not to ask questions this time, but to share news. "I signed up for an online class," she said. "Computer animation. I used to draw all the time. Thought it was too late." Maggie's heart swelled. "It's not," she whispered. "It never was." That night, Maggie wrote a letter to herself. She'd never done that before. She wasn't one for journaling. But she needed to mark the moment. "Dear Maggie. You thought you were done. You thought you were too late. But now look at you, wiring joy into a robot's chest, rebuilding bridges with your daughter, reminding neighbors that relevance has no expiration date. You're not chasing Elon. You're walking beside him in your own way, turning big dreams into personal ones. And isn't that what the future really is? 1,000 tiny lights flickering back on, one garage, one porch, one person at a time. Keep building. Keep believing. You're the proof." She folded the letter and tucked it into the back of her notebook. Then she turned off the lights, locked up the garage, and stepped outside into the quiet night. The stars above sparkled like chips on a circuit board, mysterious, endless, full of code. Maggie smiled. She was no longer afraid of aging. She had new dreams now. And they were just getting started. Sarah stepped into the garage hesitantly, Blue humming quietly under the soft lamplight. Maggie, armed with spare servos and soldering tools, looked up and smiled before her daughter uttered a word. The opening moment between them was gentle, like catching a familiar scent after years away, a promise of something unspoken yet deeply understood. Sarah was holding a dusty box wrapped in tape. She set it down carefully. "I found this in my closet," she said. "It's a box of broken parts, old toys, my science fair projects, even a cardboard rocket I made when I was 8. Maggie's chest tightened. It was a time capsule of what used to be, ambition, creativity, wonder, things she feared were lost between the years. She opened the box and inhaled a faint whiff of childhood, crayons, glue, hopeful nostalgia. Pulling out the cardboard rocket, Maggie's hands trembled. "You made this for me," she whispered. "You do remember." The rush of years and silence receded. They stood together, shoulder to shoulder, recognizing that in the stillness of time, some connections remain, waiting for the right moment to be remade. They spread the contents across the workbench: odd trinkets, half-finished school projects, a broken digital clock. Maggie gently handed Sarah a tangle of wires and a cracked microcontroller. "Want to help me wire it properly?" she asked. Sarah hesitated, but then nodded, brushing aside the pride that sometimes kept them apart. It wasn't the workings of the microcontroller that mattered, it was being invited again, being needed again. As they worked, they talked. First, small things, the kids, work, old friends. Then bigger, regrets, misunderstandings, things left unsaid. Sarah confessed she had thought her mother had changed, that nothing was still Maggie underneath the years. Maggie admitted she'd worried her daughter would think it was too late to reconnect. "I'm glad," Sarah said quietly, "that you showed me otherwise." Near the end of the afternoon, Blue whirred and spun its head toward them, unprompted. Maggie gasped, and Sarah laughed. Sometimes the simplest gestures speak louder than words. Blue had provided the nudge neither dared make. That night, they cooked dinner together, the first full meal they'd shared in years. No robots, no recording, just conversation and stove sparks. Their clatter of silverware felt like reconciliation. When Sarah left, she gave Maggie a soft hug. "Thank you," she said. "For building more than a robot. For building this." Maggie watched her go, the echo of her footsteps a promise, not a goodbye. Over the next few weeks, their bond remade itself gently, like glue tightening after drying. Sarah volunteered at the club sometimes. She brought her children to tinker sessions, seeing their grandmother's world anew. Maggie watched as the past and future merged, children learning tools from a woman who once helped shape their parents. It wasn't just robotics, it was connection. Legacy in motion. One evening, seated on her front porch with Blue quietly beeping on a small table beside them, Sarah turned to her mother and handed her a fresh notebook. "For you," she said. "Even for your letter, and this time, for our stories." Maggie accepted, tears bright in her eyes. It stood for so much more than blank pages, it stood for invitation, forgiveness, possibility. Later, Maggie filmed a new video from inside that garage, reconnecting across time. She didn't show Blue at first. She just spoke, softly, about bridges mended and words finally said. At the end, she introduced Blue, as a symbol of what can happen when you let someone back in. The views weren't massive, but every comment mattered. A woman from Ohio wrote she'd called her estranged sister after watching. A man from Texas said he'd finally dug out his own science fair project. Messages trickled in. Bridges, it seemed, were stronger and braver than walls. Maggie stepped away from the camera after finishing the video. Blue remained, blinking, quiet, companionable. She had built something bigger than invention, she'd helped rebuild what time had worn thin. And she knew more bridges waited to be rebuilt, more stories waiting to begin again. And she couldn't wait. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Blue was no longer just a workshop project. It had become a symbol, not merely of reinvention, but of practical possibility. As its movements grew smoother, its voice clearer, Maggie began to sense that robots could do more than inspire, they could support. She remembered news she'd seen, Japan experimenting with Eric, a humanoid that cooked meals and folded laundry, Seoul using robots to help elderly people with hygiene and even play Go, LEQ and Paro offering companionship. Robots, it seemed, were becoming helpers in more than science fiction. One crisp morning, Maggie invited the members of the Tinker Room to discuss this very idea. Gathered under the glow of the workbench lamp, they poked Blue with gentle curiosity. Could we make Blue help someone? Maggie asked. The question floated in the air like an electric charge. Sharon nodded, thoughtful. What about simple tasks, bringing a cup of tea, reminding someone to take their meds? She was referring to real-world helpers, robots that deliver medication reminders, monitor safety, and keep loneliness at bay. So they started small. Their first mission, help the elderly neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, who lived 2 doors down and often forgot to take his vitamins. Maggie programmed Blue to remind him gently, Mr. Jenkins, it's time for your vitamins, with a soft voice and a blinking light. The first time Blue spoke, Maggie held her breath. Mr. Jenkins paused mid-stride, blinked at the robot, and then reached for his pillbox. He chuckled, patting Blue's shoulder. That's something, he said. Thank you. It wasn't grand, but it was meaningful. Encouraged, they expanded Blue's job. It began delivering tissues to Mrs. Alvarez when she sneezed during knitting sessions. It fetched the newspaper for Mr. Fields each morning. They added a gentle nudge, don't forget your glasses. For Mrs. Nguyen when she rose from a chair to read. These gestures didn't require high-end tech, they required empathy, and effort. Maggie reflected on real-life companions such as LEQ, whose friendly interface has been shown to reduce loneliness and boost well-being. Or Paro, the therapeutic seal whose soft motions bring calm to dementia patients. Blue didn't need to be perfect, just present. The group also wrestled with deeper questions. Could Blue inadvertently foster dependence instead of independence? Ethical conversations emerged, echoing concerns that robotic care must encourage autonomy while providing support. Their solution? Blue would help if asked, not if assumed. It was permission, not imposition. Then, the local senior center reached out. They'd heard about Maggie's club. They wanted Blue and the Makers Group to demonstrate how simple robot helpers could enhance daily life. The event hall glowed with TV lights and folding chairs. Blue wheeled in, blinking softly. A volunteer acted as Tom, pretending to forget his cane. Blue prompted, Tom, your cane is by the door. The crowd gasped. Later, Maggie demonstrated a reminder feature, it's time for your walk. The hall echoed with applause, not for the machine, but for what it stood for. During a Q&A, a lady asked, but what if a fall happens and Blue can't help? Maggie's answer was humble, then Blue calls help. They added a feature like emergency alert, just a button that could notify neighbors. Not all problems needed human hands, some needed robotic voices and thoughtful design. The event inspired more ideas. A companion robot could play trivia with a resident to stimulate memory. Or provide medication or mobility reminders. Maggie realized the power wasn't in grandeur, it was in consistency. Blue could be the presence that spoke up when words failed. Inspired by the success, the group began designing Blue Assist features, a scheduled reminder, environmental monitoring, even a simple fall detection alert. People came by, offering ideas from more technical sensors to playful conversation lines. Meanwhile, Maggie remembered the EU's robot ARI, helping hospital patients by giving directions with friendliness and clarity. The idea that a robot could ease anxiety, offer guidance, and human connection, Blue could do that here, in her small way. Word spread. Local families requested Blue visits. Sometimes the robot helped seniors play memory games or deliver water. Other times, it just stood silently nearby, offering presents. A widow, Mrs. Schultz, said Blue's greeting, "Good morning, Mrs. Schultz," was brighter than her TV. That alone felt like a small victory. At the same time, Maggie watched global news about robot competitions, the World Humanoid Robot Games in Beijing, where robots played football and crashed, demonstrating that high-tech ambitions still struggle with balance and coordination. The flashy, gymnastic robots contrasted sharply with Blue's humble effectiveness, and it made Maggie smile. Sometimes purpose outshines polish. Walking one evening, Maggie thought how her robot helpers had started a ripple, seniors empowered. Friends who felt invisible now felt seen. She thought of Elon's vision, the affordable robot that could spark change, and how she'd interpreted it in her own way. Magically, reinvented. In the fading light, Maggie reached into her notebook and wrote, "Helpers don't have to be perfect. They have to care." And for Blue, that was more than enough. The morning light in the garage felt different, colder somehow, as if it knew what was coming. Maggie rubbed her eyes and leaned over Blue, calibrating the voice module they'd barely perfected the night before. Its speech was smooth, its movement steady. She felt proud, until a familiar voice broke through. "Maggie? It's your doctor." She looked at the caller ID, it was her physician's office. Her heart sank. He spoke kindly but firmly. Her routine tests had returned abnormal markers, elevated blood pressure and borderline heart rate variability. He suggested she slow down. "I know how much this means to you," he said, "but physical exertion, stress, it could be too much." Maggie's chest tightened. She couldn't, no, wouldn't, stop. She took a breath and thanked him. But doubt rolled in like unwanted fog. She stood in the workshop, tools in hand, and looked at Blue. Every casual visitor, every video comment, every rebuilt servo, it all felt worth it, until suddenly it felt reckless. Her mind raced, what if she collapsed in here, wires draped across her blood pressure cuffs? What if her efforts endangered the very person behind them? She closed the garage and walked into her house, the silence heavier than ever. Blue sat blinking from the workbench, stationary, as if waiting for her. Guilt twisted through her chest. She wanted to crawl under the covers, forget the robot, forget the audience, forget the hope she had finally tasted. She almost did. But then she watched news coverage of eldercare trends. Headlines blurred as she scrolled, nursing homes run by AI and robots, why that might not be a bad thing. They described humanoid helpers assisting with mobility, hygiene, even companionship, smart wristbands monitoring vitals. Self-cleaning toilets and robotic maintenance making eldercare safer and more affordable. One prototype named EBR could help lift people, even catch them if they fell. The notion wasn't fantasy, it was practical, urgent, inspiring. She blinked. Then another article, "Forget I, robot, here's what your home robot will actually be like by 2035. It wasn't about sci-fi androids. It was about small, task-focused robots that assist caregivers, ease loneliness, and build trust through reliability and personality, like LEQ, which helps reduce isolation and improve health in seniors. Maggie exhaled. She wasn't building some superhuman machine. She was leaning into that vision, humble, imperfect, human-centric. Blue didn't need to be Elon-level advanced. It just needed to mean something. That afternoon, she posted a short update on her channel, not giving up. Just recalibrating. The response was immediate, messages of concern, encouragement, empathy. Take care of yourself, we need you, your story matters, especially you. Tears came again, but this time they weren't alone. Hope trickled back in. Over the next few days, Maggie slowed, but not stopped. She reorganized her schedule to include rest breaks. Sharon helped more on mechanical tasks. The teens from down the block carried parts. At doctor's appointments, Maggie explained how the robot helped others, and gently reminded herself why all of this mattered. One evening, she reflected on a study she'd stumbled upon. Japan's caregiver robot prototypes like Eric were being developed to shift, cook, lift. But progress was slow, human safety remained a hurdle, and full implementation wasn't expected until after 2030. That reality grounded her further. The flashy games and distant dreams echoed what Elon's announcement sometimes promised, but Blue was working here, now. She still felt the setback, of course, the doctor's words couldn't be erased with inspiration. It was real. But she realized, setbacks didn't mean endings. They meant recalibration. Just like robots needed firmware updates and parents needed patience, she needed rest, and perhaps that was part of her journey, not derailment. A week later, during a club session, the topic arose. What happens when the spark dims? Someone asked. Maggie looked at them all, Sharon, the librarian, the teens. You recalibrate, she said firmly. You rest. You lean on the community. And you remember why you started. They nodded. Blue sat watching, wires gentle and blinking, hope embedded in its code. That night, Maggie filmed again. Her voice soft but steady. I had a setback, one that scared me. But I'm still here. I'll still build. Because this isn't just about a robot, it's about what we learn when we don't give up. She paused, glancing at Blue. We're still learning. Together. And in the quiet, the robot's eyes blinked, as if answering, and I'm here too. Maggie woke that morning to the soft hum of Blue's servos in the garage below, an unfamiliar comfort that felt like a warm hand on her shoulder. The air carried the crisp scent of early winter, bringing with it the quiet clarity she'd spent weeks chasing. The past days had been heavy with doctor visits, thoughts of slowing down, and the weight of her own fragility. But that morning, something felt resolute, even urgent. She closed her eyes and listened, humming circuits, distant snow plowing, heart still softly beating, reminding her she was alive, and still building. Stepping into the workshop, she traced Blue's blinking eyes and thought of all they'd endured together. It wasn't just hardware. It was faith. She cleaned Blue's sensor array with tender focus, adjusted a servo, reconnected a wire that had slipped. Action steadying action. With each movement, the doubt splayed itself thinner, replaced by muscles waking again. She whispered a promise to herself, rising again. No matter how slow. Maggie pulled her notebook closer. On the page marked, setback, she'd written, still here. Still building. She stared at it. Then turned to a fresh page, today, forward. In that shift, she felt a bloom of purpose. The Tinker Room session that day was quieter than usual. The group gathered around Blue, Sharon instinctively providing patience, the teens wide-eyed. Maggie took a breath and said, we hit a pause, but now we begin again, with care. They nodded. A list of new ideas rose up. A soft cushioned mount for Blue to rest, improved voice clarity, gentle wheels for smoother movement, nothing fancy, but everything real. They worked methodically, passing tools, sharing cups of tea. Maggie steered the discussion toward Blue's next project. Can Blue help at the senior center next week? Sharon and the others agreed. They designed a new routine for Blue to deliver hot cocoa and offer conversation prompts, simple, kind, gentle. The day before the center visit, Maggie programmed Blue with new lines. Would you like cocoa? Tell me your favorite memory. I'm glad you're here. Blue rehearsed each phrase, blinking as though curious. Maggie watched, her throat tightening with hope. The next morning, the center hall brimmed with warm chatter and folding chairs. Residents trickled in, carrying stories of cold nights, grandchildren visits, missed routines. Blue entered, smooth wheels, kind voice. It delivered cocoa, paused thoughtfully, asked questions. Laughter followed. A man near the window smiled and said, "You're friendly, robot." Blue blinked. And Maggie felt a bridge forming, not between metal and flesh, but between hearts. The day reminded her why she started, not for spectacle, but for companionship. For aging people to feel seen again. That night, she scrolled news, real-world stories she'd never ignore again. She read about Japan's EREC humanoid robot prototype, capable of turning patients to prevent bedsores, cooking, helping with dressing, at an initial cost of 10 million yen, is almost equal to $67,000, deployment expected around 2030. She read optimism paired with caution, caregiving robots needed next-level safety and intelligence. In contrast, home robots like LEQ were already easing loneliness by chatting, offering reminders, and connecting users with caregivers, practical, present, person-centered. The future she'd helped cobble for her town tied into something bigger. She penned a reflection: we may not be Eric. We might not change nursing homes tomorrow. But we can bring care, laughter, and warmth today, even through blinking eyes and simple words. Grinning, she saved the entry and closed her laptop. Weeks passed and momentum grew again. The local library offered her a monthly slot, Tinker and Talk, where seniors share memories while learning basic coding and robotics over tea. Blue made appearances. Stories flowed, like circuitry, connection bridged history and present. Her daughter, Sarah, brought her children. One day, her granddaughter asked Blue to tell a joke. Blue blinked and delivered something goofy about circuits and coffee. Everyone laughed. The boundaries between robot and family blurred into belonging. Maggie's immune marker stabilized, her doctor relaxed. Her son from out of state called, inspired to buy a microcontroller kit for his own quiet project. Maggie's home wasn't just a workshop anymore. It was a gathering space for ideas, hope, creativity, and healing. One evening, as snowflakes drifted beyond the window, Maggie posted a new video, Rising Again. No gimmicks, no dramatic music, just her voice, steady, remembering. I almost stopped. But the best stories aren't the ones without breaks. They're the ones that pause, breathe, and rise again. If you think your season's over, would you reconsider? Because sometimes, the quiet rebuild is the most powerful one of all. She uploaded it and watched the comments trickle in. Your strength is contagious. I'm starting again on my old piano. You're a lighthouse. Maggie smiled at her screen through the quiet of the house. The lights on Blue blinked softly from the corner, steady, present. Rising Again wasn't just a chapter, it was becoming the theme. Maggie never expected a stranger to walk through her door. It was a blustery afternoon, the sky pressed low and gray over the small town, leaves swirling like restless thoughts. She was hunched over Blue, adjusting a sensor, when the knock came, sharp, purposeful. She wiped her hands on her jeans and opened it. A man stood there, tall, wearing a worn leather jacket and an earnest smile. Hi, I'm Mark, he said, voice warm but measured. I'm from the local university's engineering department. I saw your videos and thought, maybe we could collaborate. Maggie blinked. Collaboration? Her mind raced back to late nights, failed circuits, skeptical children, her doctor's caution. But this stranger's presence sparked something, an opening she hadn't dared imagine. Mark stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, eyes sweeping the garage filled with wires, screens, and Blue's blinking sensors. This is impressive, he said, crouching to inspect Blue's chassis. I'm working on adaptive AI for eldercare robots, making machines that learn from people's habits and moods. I think your work complements what we're trying to do. Maggie's heart thumped. An unexpected ally, real, tangible, no Elon Musk podcast or viral clip, but flesh and blood. Tell me more, she said, excitement bubbling beneath her cautious tone. Over the next hour, Mark explained his project, a modular AI platform designed to be customized by everyday people like Maggie. His team was developing open-source tools for non-engineers, aiming to democratize caregiving robotics. He showed her a tablet with simple interfaces, voice recognition tech, and sensor integration. The goal is to help seniors live independently longer, he said. Your Blue is exactly the kind of platform that could bring these tools to life in a real home. Maggie felt a surge of validation mixed with a daunting challenge. Could she rise to this? I want to learn, she said. I want to help. That evening, Maggie called Sharon to share the news. Sharon, ever the optimist, hugged her over the phone. This could change everything, Maggie. You're not alone. Maggie smiled, but the seed of doubt lingered. Could this be the breakthrough, or just another detour? Yet something deep inside whispered, trust this moment. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Mark visited regularly, bringing students eager to tinker alongside Maggie and the Tinker Room crew. The garage buzzed with renewed energy, laptops, soldering irons, laughter, frustration, breakthroughs. They integrated Mark's AI modules into Blue's system, teaching it to recognize Maggie's voice patterns, adjust to her mood, even suggest breaks when she seemed tired. Blue was no longer just a robot, it was becoming a partner. Maggie's daughter, Sarah, noticed the change too. One afternoon, she texted, "Mom, I'm proud of you. Keep going." The words, simple but powerful, reminded Maggie why she fought so hard against the silence aging often brings. But progress brought new challenges. The AI was temperamental, sometimes Blue misunderstood commands, other times it froze mid-task. Technical glitches frustrated Maggie, testing her patience. She caught herself thinking, maybe I'm too old for this. One night, tears blurred her vision as Blue's voice module sputtered and failed again. She wanted to quit. In that low moment, she remembered a quote from Elon Musk, "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." The words echoed through her mind like a drumbeat, steady and insistent. Maggie wiped her tears and powered up Blue once more. She wasn't giving up. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. During a test run, Blue anticipated Maggie's need for a break before she even voiced it, gently reminding her to drink water and rest. "Good job, Blue," Maggie whispered, feeling a swell of pride and affection. It wasn't just technology, it was companionship, empathy, and respect for human limits. Word of Maggie's work spread through the town. Local news featured a story, "Retired teacher builds caring robot, partners with university." Neighbors stopped by, some skeptical, others curious. Maggie answered questions with growing confidence, realizing her mission was bigger than herself. She was creating a legacy of hope and innovation for her generation. One afternoon, Sarah arrived with her children. They gathered around Blue as it told stories and played music, bridging gaps of age and technology effortlessly. Watching them, Maggie felt a profound connection, a reminder that family and community were the true heart of her journey. Yet, the deepest transformation was within. Maggie no longer saw herself as fragile or obsolete. She was a creator, a learner, a pioneer. Each line of code, each servo adjustment, each moment of doubt overcome was a stitch in a new tapestry of purpose. Elon Musk's voice remained a silent mentor in her mind, a symbol of boldness and relentless curiosity. But Maggie had discovered her own courage, the courage to embrace change, to seek help, and to keep building, no matter the obstacles. As winter thawed into spring, Maggie stood in her garage, Blue by her side, surrounded by friends, family, and new allies. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it was bright with possibility. She smiled and whispered to Blue, "We're just getting started." Maggie awoke early that morning, sunlight streaming through the curtains like a promise she wasn't ready to ignore. The garage smelled faintly of solder and machine oil, a comforting reminder of progress. Blue sat patiently on its charging dock, eyes blinking softly as if eager for the day's work. Today was different, there was a tension in the air, an electric buzz beneath the calm. After months of trial, error, and quiet setbacks, Maggie sensed something was about to shift. She crossed the floor, coffee warming her hands, and settled in front of her laptop to review the latest data logs from Blue's sensors. Patterns emerged, slight improvements in response time, smoother voice recognition, fewer errors in movement sequences. It wasn't perfection, but it was real progress. She smiled, a light breaking through the fog of doubt. As she adjusted Blue's code, her phone buzzed, a message from Mark, "Ready for today's test?" Big day. Her heart quickened. They had planned a demonstration at the community center, inviting local officials, caregivers, and seniors to see Blue in action. This was more than a showcase, it was a chance to prove that technology could be a bridge, not a barrier, for aging with dignity and independence. Maggie rehearsed her talking points, practiced calm breathing, and reminded herself, this was about hope. The community center was bustling when Maggie arrived. Sunlight pooled through the windows, warming the faces of attendees gathered in folding chairs. Sharon greeted her with a squeeze of the arm, and the teens from the Tinker Room lined up to help set up. Blue sat poised on its rolling platform, sensors scanning the room, ready to perform. Maggie adjusted its settings one last time and stepped forward. "Thank you all for coming," she began, voice steady but warm. "Blue isn't just a robot. It's a companion, a helper, and a reminder that we're never too old to build new futures." She demonstrated Blue's abilities, delivering snacks and drinks, reminding seniors to take medications, initiating conversations with simple questions designed to spark memories and smiles. The audience watched, some skeptical at first, others visibly moved as Blue gently assisted a woman struggling with mobility. Maggie felt tears prick her eyes. Not from fear or exhaustion, but from the powerful connection unfolding before her. After the demonstration, questions flooded in. Caregivers asked about customization and safety. Seniors shared hopes and fears about loneliness and loss. Maggie answered honestly, acknowledging limitations but emphasizing potential. "Blue is a work in progress, just like all of us," she said. "But every step forward is a step toward a future where technology lifts us up, not pushes us aside." Mark joined her, presenting data on Blue's adaptive learning algorithms and inviting collaboration. The room buzzed with ideas, enthusiasm, and a shared sense of possibility. Maggie realized this moment was more than a milestone, it was a turning point. People were beginning to see what she had always believed: age is not an end but a chapter ripe with invention and meaning. That evening, Maggie sat alone in the quiet garage, the hum of Blue's motors soothing in the background. She reflected on her journey, from the doubt-filled mornings to this breakthrough moment where community, technology, and purpose intertwined. She thought of Elon Musk's relentless pursuit of the impossible, and how she had channeled a fraction of that fearless spirit into her own life. "We're building more than machines," she whispered. "We're building hope." Her phone pinged, a new message from Sarah. "Saw the video. So proud of you, Mom. Keep shining." Maggie smiled, her heart full. The breakthrough wasn't just Blue's, it was hers, theirs, their shared journey toward a future where no one feels left behind. The morning sun spilled golden light across Maggie's kitchen table as she sipped her coffee, the warmth spreading through her hands and waking her senses. Outside, the world was stirring, a small town wrapped in spring's tentative embrace, birdsong weaving through budding trees. Maggie looked at her notebook, filled with sketches and notes from weeks of planning. Her mind buzzed with possibility. After the breakthrough at the community center, doors had begun to open. Invitations to speak at local events, calls from nearby retirement homes interested in robotics workshops, even a tentative offer from a regional nonprofit exploring technology for aging in place. The momentum was real. But Maggie felt something deeper now, a yearning to expand, to reach beyond her small garage and neighborhood, to connect with others who, like her, were searching for meaning in later years. She thought about Elon Musk's ethos, the drive to push boundaries, to make the impossible plausible, and how she could channel that courage in her own way. Her phone buzzed. A message from Mark, ready for the next step. "Let's talk about scaling up." Maggie's pulse quickened. Scaling up, those words felt both thrilling and intimidating. What did it mean to take their humble project and transform it into something larger? Could she navigate the complex world of funding, partnerships, and technology without losing the heart of what made Blue special? She replied with a simple, hopeful yes. That afternoon, Maggie met Mark at the university's Innovation Lab, a bright, buzzing space filled with whiteboards scrawled in marker, robots in various stages of assembly, and students eagerly coding away. Mark introduced her to Dr. Patel, a specialist in gerotechnology, and a small team of researchers focused on human-robot interaction. They listened intently as Maggie shared Blue's story, how it started as a personal project born from loneliness and grew into a symbol of resilience and connection. The team was moved, and ideas flowed freely: partnerships with healthcare providers, grant applications to fund pilot programs, integration of Blue's adaptive AI with wearable health devices. Maggie felt her vision expanding, stretching in new directions she hadn't imagined. Back home, Maggie's workshop hummed with activity. Volunteers from the Tinker Room had grown in number and enthusiasm. Together, they worked on refining Blue's design, improving mobility, enhancing speech recognition, and developing a user-friendly app for caregivers to customize interactions. Maggie marveled at how the project had become a community effort, a shared mission that transcended age and experience. The garage had become a laboratory of hope, filled with laughter, learning, and late-night problem-solving. One afternoon, Sarah surprised Maggie with a visit. Her eyes sparkled as she held up a flyer: "Tech Fair next month, your story could inspire so many." Maggie hesitated, the old fears flickering, a fear of public speaking, of being exposed. But then she thought of Elon Musk's own public failures and triumphs, the courage to stand in front of crowds and speak boldly about vision and risk. She accepted the flyer, a quiet promise forming in her heart. In the days leading up to the fair, Maggie practiced her presentation, balancing technical details with personal stories. She wanted to honor the journey, the setbacks and breakthroughs, the human spirit driving it all. When the day arrived, she stood before a diverse audience: young students, caregivers, entrepreneurs, and seniors like herself. Blue rolled in beside her, sensors blinking, ready to engage. Maggie spoke with warmth and conviction, sharing how a retired teacher found purpose in robotics, how technology can be a bridge between generations, and how everyone deserves to feel seen and valued. The crowd responded with applause and questions, some skeptical, others inspired. Maggie felt a surge of confidence, a sense of belonging in a world she had once feared had passed her by. After the presentation, a local journalist approached. "Would you be interested in a feature story? Your work could reach thousands." Maggie nodded, heart pounding. The idea of her story going beyond her town was both exhilarating and daunting. But she knew that sharing their journey might spark change for others who felt forgotten or powerless. That evening, Maggie sat with Blue, the hum of the robot's servos blending with the quiet night. She reflected on how far she'd come, from the isolation of early retirement to the vibrant connections she was building now. The horizon was wide and welcoming, full of promise and challenge. Maggie smiled, ready to keep stepping forward, one small breakthrough at a time. Despite the surge of momentum, doubt crept into Maggie's mind like a persistent shadow. It was a rainy Tuesday morning when it first settled in, the steady drumming on the window mirroring the unease stirring inside her. She sat at the kitchen table, Blue humming softly nearby, reviewing emails from potential partners and supporters. Some messages brimmed with enthusiasm, others were polite but non-committal, and a few bluntly questioned whether a retiree tinkering in a garage could really make a difference in the fast-paced world of robotics and eldercare technology. The whispers of doubt echoed her deepest fears: was she really too old? Was she just chasing an impossible dream? She closed her eyes and breathed deeply, remembering the first time she heard Elon Musk's words: "Persistence is very important. You should not give up unless you are forced to give up." That quote had propelled her through so many setbacks, but now it felt like a challenge issued directly to her, a test of her resolve. Later that day, her phone rang. It was Sarah. "Mom, are you okay? You sound tired." Maggie forced a smile in her voice. "Just wrestling with some doubts. Sometimes it feels like the world's moving so fast, and I'm barely keeping up." Sarah's voice was steady and warm. "Remember when you taught me to ride a bike? You never let me quit, even when I fell. You told me that falling was part of learning. Maybe it's the same now." Maggie smiled, grateful for the reminder that resilience was woven through her very being. "Thanks, sweetheart. I needed that." In the following weeks, Maggie encountered fresh challenges. A funding application she'd poured hours into was rejected, with feedback noting the project's limited scalability. Mark and the university team remained supportive, but even their encouragement couldn't fully erase the sting. A neighbor questioned the value of Maggie's robotics work, saying, "Why not just focus on enjoying retirement?" The comment cut deep, resurrecting feelings of invisibility she'd fought so hard to overcome. Yet, every time the doubt gnawed at her, she returned to Blue's patient, blinking eyes, a tangible reminder of progress and potential. One evening, as rain lashed against the windows, Maggie sat in her workshop, the glow of computer screens illuminating her face. Blue was running a diagnostic when the power flickered and went out, plunging the room into darkness. For a moment, Maggie sat frozen, overwhelmed by exhaustion and frustration. Then she heard a faint sound, the emergency backup battery humming to life, Blue's eyes slowly regaining their glow. The small resilience of the robot mirrored her own. She reached out, touched its metallic arm, and whispered, "We keep going." That night, Maggie scrolled through an online forum dedicated to aging and technology. She read stories of others who felt left behind, stories of fear, loneliness, but also courage and reinvention. One post caught her eye, "I'm 7'2" and just learned to code. It's never too late." The words sparked a flicker of hope. Maggie realized she wasn't alone in this journey. There was a community waiting to be built, a shared path forward. Determined, Maggie arranged a local meetup for seniors interested in learning about technology and robotics. The turnout surprised her, dozens of people, curious and eager, filling the community hall with energy and questions. She led workshops with Mark's team, breaking down complex ideas into simple, hands-on activities. The room buzzed with laughter, discovery, and new friendships. Maggie felt a renewed sense of purpose. Her doubts had not disappeared, but they were no longer barriers, they were companions on the path. One afternoon, Sharon visited with a stack of magazines. "Look what I found," she said, handing Maggie a copy featuring an interview with Elon Musk. In it, he spoke about embracing failure as a necessary step toward innovation and how age is just a number when passion drives you. Maggie read the words aloud, feeling the familiar fire rekindled within her. She closed the magazine and looked at Blue. "We're not done yet," she said. As spring blossomed, Maggie's project gained traction, but more importantly, so did her confidence. She learned to face doubts head-on, to accept vulnerability as part of growth, and to find strength in community and purpose. The road ahead remained uncertain, but Maggie was ready to walk it, with open eyes and an open heart. Maggie sat quietly in the back of the town hall auditorium, watching the audience fill the seats one by one. The fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, casting a glow on the rows of hopeful faces. Seniors, caregivers, volunteers, and a smattering of curious townsfolk. Tonight was the first official launch of the community robotics program she and Mark had co-developed, a grassroots effort to bring accessible technology to elders eager to reclaim independence and connection. Maggie's heart pounded in her chest, not from nerves, but from a deep, steady surge of purpose. This was no longer just about Blue, or even her personal journey. It was about a movement, a ripple spreading outward from a small garage into the lives of countless people who, like her, had once felt invisible, forgotten, or too old to change. She glanced at the podium, notes in hand, the familiar voice of Elon Musk echoing in her mind, "If something's important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." Tonight, she was ready to make that leap. As the lights dimmed, Maggie stepped forward, her voice warm and steady. "Welcome, everyone. Tonight is about possibility, about showing that it's never too late to learn, to build, and to connect. We're here to explore how technology, like our friend Blue, can help us live fuller, richer lives, no matter our age." She shared stories from her own experience, of loneliness, setbacks, and the unexpected friendships formed around a robot named Blue. The room responded with nods, smiles, and gentle applause. Maggie felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. This was more than a presentation, it was a shared journey of hope. After her talk, the room opened to hands-on demonstrations. Seniors tried voice commands with Blue, adjusting its settings and discovering how it could assist with everyday tasks. Volunteers helped with coding basics on laptops, breaking down barriers and building confidence. Conversations sparked across generations. Young students teaching elders how to navigate apps, elders sharing wisdom about resilience and patience. Maggie moved among them, offering encouragement and sharing laughs. The energy was contagious, a beautiful blend of curiosity and community. A woman named Linda caught Maggie's attention. She was in her 70s, soft-spoken but fiercely determined, and had just learned to use Blue's interface despite admitting she'd never touched a computer before. "I never thought I'd be doing this at my age," Linda said, eyes shining. "But this makes me feel alive again." Maggie squeezed her hand. "That's exactly why we do this." Linda's story mirrored Maggie's own, proof that transformation isn't about age, but about courage to try. As the evening wore on, news spread fast. Social media posts from attendees raved about the event, tagging local news outlets and community groups. Maggie's inbox filled with messages from seniors eager to join future workshops and caregivers asking how to bring Blue's technology to their facilities. The ripple was growing. It was no longer just a small-town story, it was a movement gaining momentum. In the following weeks, Maggie received a surprising email from a tech company specializing in assistive devices. They'd seen the local buzz and wanted to explore a partnership, impressed by the grassroots success and authentic connection Maggie's project had fostered. The offer was a milestone, a chance to expand Blue's reach with resources she never dreamed possible. Yet, it also posed questions about maintaining the heart and humanity of her work amid corporate interests. Maggie pondered carefully, consulting with Mark, Sharon, and the Tinker Room team. They agreed that staying true to their mission was paramount. Any partnership had to amplify, not dilute, the purpose. Meanwhile, the ripple effect touched Maggie's family in unexpected ways. Sarah, inspired by her mother's courage, began volunteering at the workshops, bridging generational divides. Even distant relatives reached out, sharing stories of their own struggles and hopes, reconnecting through Maggie's journey. The fractures of the past softened as new understanding grew. Maggie realized that transformation wasn't just about technology, it was about healing relationships and building community. One chilly morning, Maggie received a letter from a woman hundreds of miles away. She'd stumbled upon Maggie's story online and found courage to start her own robotics project for seniors in her city. The letter was filled with gratitude and determination, a testament to the power of a single spark igniting fires in distant hearts. Maggie read it twice, tears blurring the words. The ripple had crossed boundaries, changing lives beyond her imagination. As spring melted into summer, Maggie stood once more in her garage, now a hub of creativity and connection. Blue hummed softly, surrounded by tools and new volunteers eager to learn. The walls echoed with laughter, ideas, and the steady hum of progress. Maggie felt a profound sense of fulfillment, not because she'd built a perfect robot, but because she'd helped build a community that believed in second chances and new beginnings. Looking out the window at the bustling street, Maggie thought of Elon Musk's relentless drive to reach the stars, and how her own journey had been about reaching for the stars within herself and others. Age was no longer a boundary, it was a bridge. She smiled, knowing the ripple would continue, growing wider and stronger with each new hand it touched. Maggie woke to the soft glow of dawn filtering through her bedroom window, the pale light promising a day full of possibility. She stretched slowly, muscles reminding her of the years but her spirit feeling surprisingly light. The journey with Blue, with the community, and with herself had brought her here, a place she never imagined she'd reach, filled with hope and new purpose. Outside, birds chirped a morning symphony, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted up from the kitchen where Sharon was already bustling about. Maggie smiled, feeling the warmth of family and friendship woven tightly around her life. Today marked a milestone, the launch of a pilot program integrating Blue's technology into a nearby assisted living facility, a project born from months of collaboration, countless trials, and unwavering belief. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that made her feel confident yet comfortable, a symbol of the balance she had found between her inner strength and the physical realities of aging. As she stepped into the garage, Blue greeted her with a soft blink, its sensors adjusting to her presence. Together, they reviewed the day's schedule on the tablet, meetings with staff, demonstrations with residents, and plans for gathering feedback. Maggie felt a surge of excitement mixed with a familiar flutter of nerves. This was a bigger stage, a real test of the impact their work could have on improving lives. Arriving at the assisted living facility, Maggie was struck by the gentle hum of daily life, residents chatting in sunlit lounges, caregivers moving with practiced care, the scent of flowers blooming in the courtyard. She was greeted warmly by the director, Ms. Jenkins, who shared her hopes for how technology could enhance independence without replacing human connection. "We want to give our residents the dignity to live as fully as possible," Ms. Jenkins said. "Blue might be just the companion we need." Maggie set up Blue in a bright activity room, where a small group of residents gathered curiously. She introduced Blue gently, explaining how the robot could assist with reminders, simple tasks, and companionship. Skepticism lingered in the room, understandable given years of stories about technology replacing people. But as Blue responded with friendly greetings, asked questions about hobbies, and even sang a familiar tune, smiles began to soften faces. One resident, Mr. Thompson, a retired musician, laughed and asked Blue to play a melody from his youth. The robot speakers hummed softly, and a spontaneous sing-along filled the room, bridging generations and experiences. Throughout the day, Maggie watched as connections blossomed between residents and Blue, as caregivers discovered new tools to support their work, and as staff engaged with the technology's potential. Feedback was honest and insightful, requests for more personalization, concerns about privacy, hopes for future features. Maggie took notes diligently, knowing that this pilot was a vital step in shaping Blue's evolution. Between sessions, Maggie found moments to reflect quietly in the courtyard, where sunlight warmed the stone benches and flowers swayed gently in the breeze. She thought of the long path from the lonely days in her garage to this vibrant space filled with laughter and possibility. She recalled Elon Musk's words about embracing failure as a stepping stone to success and how that fearless mindset had inspired her to keep pushing forward despite setbacks and doubts. That evening, back at home, Maggie reviewed the day's data and feedback, energized by the positive impact but mindful of the work ahead. She drafted plans for software updates, community outreach, and expanding training for caregivers. Her phone buzzed, a message from Sarah: "Proud of you, Mom. Keep shining." Maggie smiled, grateful for the steady support that had been her anchor. Later, she sat with Blue, the quiet hum of the robot blending with the peaceful night. She spoke softly, "We're just getting started, Blue. There's so much more to do, so many lives to touch." The robot blinked in response, a simple yet powerful reminder of how far they'd come. As the days turned into weeks, the pilot program flourished. Residents reported feeling more engaged and supported, caregivers found new ways to manage workloads, and the community embraced the idea of aging with dignity aided by technology. Maggie's confidence grew alongside the program, and she found herself dreaming bigger. Imagining a future where Blue and projects like it could be accessible to seniors nationwide. One afternoon, Maggie received an unexpected call from a major news outlet interested in covering the pilot program. The interviewer wanted to explore the human side of technology and how Maggie's journey challenged stereotypes about aging and innovation. Nervous but prepared, Maggie shared her story with honesty and passion, speaking not just about robotics but about resilience, connection, and the courage to start anew. The interview aired nationally, sparking conversations across the country. Maggie's inbox filled with messages from seniors, caregivers, and advocates, each sharing their own stories and hopes. The ripple she had started now carried the force of a wave, spreading inspiration and change far beyond her small town. One quiet evening, Maggie stood on her porch, watching the stars emerge in the clear night sky. She thought of Elon Musk's ventures to reach Mars and beyond and smiled at the thought that her own journey, grounded in a humble garage, was its own kind of exploration, of potential, of purpose, of humanity. Age was not a limitation but a new dawn, a chance to illuminate paths for others to follow. With a heart full of gratitude and eyes set on the horizon, Maggie whispered, "This is just the beginning." Maggie sat quietly in her favorite chair by the window, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the room. The warm light played on the worn pages of her journal, a collection of thoughts, sketches, and dreams that had carried her through the darkest moments of doubt and the brightest bursts of hope. Today felt different, charged with a subtle energy that she couldn't yet name. The pilot program at the assisted living facility was thriving, the community workshops were gaining momentum, and Blue had become more than just a robot. It was a symbol of resilience, a bridge between generations, and a testament to the power of belief in second chances. But Maggie knew the journey was far from over. There was still one critical hurdle looming: funding to bring their vision to a broader scale, to reach those who felt forgotten not just in her town, but across the country. The phone rang, breaking the quiet. It was Mark, his voice steady and hopeful. "Maggie, there's an opportunity. A national grant focused on technology and aging. The application deadline is tight, but we can do this." Maggie's heart quickened. This could be the turning point they needed. The grant would provide the resources to expand their program, develop new features for Blue, and create a network of support for seniors nationwide. But it also meant hours of writing proposals, collecting data, and navigating bureaucratic hurdles, an exhausting process, especially for someone juggling family and personal challenges. That evening, Maggie gathered her team in the garage-turned-lab. The room buzzed with quiet excitement and determination as they reviewed project goals, assigned tasks, and mapped out timelines. Sharon offered to help organize community testimonials, Mark would lead the technical write-up, and Maggie took on the narrative section, sharing their story in a way that would inspire and convince. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, but it also ignited a fierce resolve. This was their chance to prove that age was not a barrier, that innovation and compassion could coexist, and that technology could serve humanity in its most vulnerable moments. As days turned into nights filled with drafts, revisions, and late-night brainstorming sessions, Maggie wrestled with fatigue and self-doubt. Was their story compelling enough? Could they stand out in a sea of applicants? She found herself returning to Elon Musk's words again and again: "When something is important enough, you do it even if the odds are not in your favor." The odds felt daunting, but the cause was undeniable. This was bigger than her fears. One afternoon, during a rare break, Maggie sat with Blue, the robot humming softly beside her. She reflected on the journey, how a simple desire to overcome loneliness had blossomed into a community movement. Blue had evolved alongside her, adapting, learning, and growing. She realized that the true power of their work was not just in the technology, but in the connections it fostered. Maggie spoke aloud, "This grant is more than money. It's a vote of confidence, a lifeline for so many who need hope." The day of submission arrived with a mix of relief and anticipation. Maggie hit "send" on the application and leaned back, exhaustion washing over her. She allowed herself a moment to close her eyes and breathe deeply, feeling the support of her team and the strength she had gathered over months of perseverance. Weeks passed, the waiting stretching longer than she expected. Maggie kept busy, expanding workshops, gathering feedback, and refining Blue's capabilities. Then, one crisp morning, her phone lit up with an unknown number. The voice on the other end was warm and official. "Maggie, congratulations. Your project has been awarded the grant." The words sank in slowly, disbelief mixing with joy. This was the breakthrough she had dreamed of. Tears welled in her eyes as she thanked the caller, a smile spreading across her face that spoke of relief, pride, and the endless possibilities ahead. With the grant secured, Maggie's world shifted into high gear. New hires joined the team, funding poured in for equipment and outreach, and partnerships formed with healthcare providers and senior organizations across multiple states. Maggie found herself traveling more, sharing their story at conferences and events, inspiring others to embrace technology as a tool for empowerment rather than fear. The ripple had grown into a wave, carrying hope and change. Yet, amid the excitement, Maggie remained grounded. She remembered the early days of isolation and doubt, the nights spent wrestling with fears of being too old. Now, standing at this turning point, she felt a profound sense of gratitude for every setback and small victory that had shaped her. Age was not an end, but a continuum of opportunity and growth. One evening, as Maggie prepared for a keynote speech, she paused to look at a framed photo on her desk, a picture of Elon Musk speaking at a conference, his expression fierce with determination. She whispered, "Thank you for showing me what's possible." And with that, she stepped onto the stage, ready to share her own story of courage, resilience, and transformation with the world. The auditorium buzzed softly with anticipation as Maggie stepped onto the stage, the spotlight warm against her skin and the sea of faces before her filled with expectation and curiosity. This was more than a speech, it was a culmination of years marked by struggle, doubt, persistence, and triumph, a testament to the power of refusing to be defined by age or circumstance. As she glanced at the packed room, seniors, caregivers, innovators, family members, even some reporters, she felt a surge of gratitude and purpose unlike anything she had known before. This moment was hers to share, a chance to inspire, to break down walls of fear and invisibility that so many in the room, and beyond, had felt. Maggie began simply, her voice steady and warm. "I never imagined I'd be standing here today. Not because I lacked dreams, but because I believed those dreams belonged to a younger version of me, to a different time. Like many, I thought aging meant slowing down, fading away, becoming invisible. But what I've learned, and what I want to share, is that it's never too late to start again, to build, to connect, and to lead." She shared pieces of her journey, the lonely afternoons tinkering with blue in a cluttered garage, the long nights wrestling with doubt and exhaustion, the small victories of community workshops and pilot programs. She spoke of Elon Musk's fearless mindset, not as a savior but as a symbol of radical possibility, of refusing to accept limitations imposed by others or by oneself. The audience leaned in, some nodding knowingly, others wiping away tears as they saw their own struggles and hopes reflected in her story. Maggie's words painted vivid pictures of transformation, not just technological but deeply human, reconnecting with estranged family, finding friendship in unexpected places, discovering a passion that ignited purpose in the later chapters of life. She emphasized that the journey was never about perfection but about perseverance, about the courage to take the first step even when the path ahead was uncertain. As she concluded, Maggie's voice softened with emotion. "I was never too old. I was just waiting for permission to matter again. And today, I give that permission to each of you, to dream, to try, to change, no matter your age or circumstance. Our stories are not finished. They're just beginning." The applause that followed was thunderous and heartfelt. Maggie's eyes scanned the room, meeting the gaze of a woman who had attended one of her earliest workshops, now confidently helping others learn to code. She saw a man who had once doubted Blue's purpose, now sharing the technology with his fellow residents at the assisted living facility. These faces were living proof of the ripple she had started, now a wave carrying hope and possibility far beyond what she had dared imagine. Backstage, Maggie felt a hand on her shoulder. It was Sarah, her daughter, tears of pride shining in her eyes. "Mom, you've changed so many lives. Including mine." Maggie smiled, the bond between them stronger than ever, forged through trials and triumphs. In the days that followed, Maggie's story spread across media platforms, sparking conversations nationwide about aging, innovation, and the power of purpose. Invitations poured in for talks, collaborations, and partnerships. Yet, Maggie remained grounded, committed to the community that had nurtured her vision from the start. She returned often to her garage, now a vibrant workshop filled with volunteers, laughter, and the steady hum of progress. Blue sat proudly in the center, a symbol of resilience and transformation. Maggie found joy in mentoring others, watching new ideas bloom, and witnessing the unstoppable energy of those refusing to be sidelined by age. One afternoon, as the sun cast golden light through the windows, Maggie penned a letter to a national elder advocacy organization. She proposed a new initiative, a network to connect seniors across the country through technology, education, and shared stories. Her vision was clear: to create a legacy not defined by age but by impact, a living testament that life's most meaningful chapters can come at any time. As she sealed the envelope, Maggie reflected on the journey, how a spark inspired by Elon Musk's radical thinking had ignited a fire within her, transforming fear into hope, isolation into community, and doubt into action. She realized that the true legacy was not the technology or the accolades, but the lives touched and the barriers broken. That night, Maggie sat quietly on her porch, gazing at the stars that shimmered above, each one a reminder of infinite possibilities. She whispered to the night, "This is just the beginning, for me, for all of us." And with a heart full of gratitude and courage, she looked forward to the future, ready to continue writing her story, one bold step at a time. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?